would you recommend somebody that knows absolutely nothing about rugby learn anything about rugby?
Get a rugby ball in your hand and go play. I mean, I say that slightly facetiously, but part of it is, and a couple of the folks in our group too mentioned it, and I did the same thing. You know, I mean, there's a ton of information out there from a YouTube perspective. You know, there's also just going and watching the game. Like going and watching the game, people who play rugby and people who watch rugby really like rugby, and they really like talking about rugby. So often if you are just standing next to them at a field and you say, why'd they call that? They will give you literally the entire background of like the law history, why it happened, what the strategy of it was, all this stuff. And so I think that, you know, so there's definitely this taking advantage of the fact that rugby does have that culture and that community about it. And then you know, watching rugby as much as you can, because you just start to figure it out and you start to learn it. Once you kind of get the basic rules, then you can start piecing the other parts together. Yeah.
What would be your best advice for a young girl who's going through high school looking to play like college ball?
I would say two pieces. One, take as many opportunities to learn the game as possible. You know, I went to, you know, when I was first starting to play, I went to all sorts of random rugby camps. Some of them were good, some of them were bad, but each one of them I learned something different. And I learned because there's different coaches, there's different coaching styles, and so I was able to sort of glean little bits of information from that. You know, I would say also for someone who's looking to play in college, would be to start that thinking about that earlier rather than later, not in terms of actually like the sport itself, but thinking about like what do you need to do to like be a good candidate for college in general, not necessarily just as a rugby player, right? Because rugby is going to like bring someone up and above, but only if they're at, you know, whatever the bar is set for that school. You know, especially right now where we're still, you know, some schools have scholarships, some don't. So really thinking about like, well, what do we need to do as students to be good students for going into college and then being able to play rugby there. And I know that for anyone who's, and it'll be open to everyone, I think it's gone out, but on May 12th, we have one of our practice days for the high school all-state team. But Karen Fong Donahue, who runs Rugger's Edge, will be doing a session for students and athletes, students and parents, right? Hopefully they're both students and athletes. For athletes and parents to be able to ask questions of like, what things should I be considering? How do I approach like thinking about college recruitment? She's just a wealth of information about that. So they'll be doing an actual session on the 12th for that, so that parents and athletes can ask these questions and say like, when do I take the SAT? Like, do I need to do this? Like, should I be taking AP classes? Like, do I need to go to this kind of thing? And she can really expand on that. She just has a wealth of knowledge about all that stuff.
And actually, just to speak to that really quickly, the colleges have some really great camps to go to. I know Life has one, I think Penn State has one, I think Dartmouth has one. They're really great, and even if they don't want to go to that school, but they're interested in checking out the college life and the college system, they can get some really great training, have some really great experiences, and meet some people in those environments.
And it's also a great way to get some exposure if you are looking to get potentially recruited, depending on what level you're talking about playing at. Because a number of us coaches coach at those college camps. You know, there's a lot of rules, especially the schools that are NCAA schools, about like when they can make contact with players, who they can talk to, when they can start having any of those conversations. You know, and so being able to go to a camp where the Life camp where the coach of Dartmouth is actually coaching at the Life camp with the Life coaches, you're like, all right, well, I get double exposure. You know, so there's lots of opportunities to learn more and also kind of get exposed to all these different opportunities. And you also then get a chance to be able to see what they're like as a coach before you actually commit to going and being coached by them for 4 years potentially. You're like, oh no, that coaching style's not going to work for me. Or yeah, I really, really like felt like that was the way to work. So.